Now I'm very excited to welcome back a fantastic college basketball capper, great friend of the show, and Mr. Joshua Nunn from the Action Network. You can follow Josh on X at Step on a Duck. Josh, thanks for coming back on the show, man. It is college hoop season. Woo, it feels like a long time ago that college football ended, man. But here we are, your other big passion, college sports. Nobody better than you to talk college hoops. How are you doing in the Eastern time zone right now?
Doing good, my man. I love staying up late with you and sweating some college hoops here. We've got action all the way through 2 o'clock with the Hawaii game. Kiev, it's been far too long, my friend. I love your broadcast. I was privileged to be able to be on for some college football, and we did some college hoops earlier in the season. I'm glad to be back on for you now. It's a great time of the year for college hoops, as you know, because the conference championship races are heating up. We got some of these leagues that have 3 or 4 games left in the regular season, and people are vying for positioning. So there's a lot of meaningful hoops to be played over the next couple of weeks as we lead up to Selection Sunday.
Oh, there it is. And some of these have 2 games left. It's amazing just seeing how quickly this is going. But here we are. And there's still so much basketball to be played, which makes me excited. March Madness is all about college basketball in general. My wife calls March Madness the NCAA tournament and vice versa. I'm like, no. March Madness is a lot more than that. March Madness is how to get to the NCAA tournament. It's bubble teams. It's people wishing. It's Cinderellas. It's all these conference tournaments, man. It is everything that has to do with college basketball. So that's the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah, I think it's fun to reminisce about prior seasons, and you and I have done this for several decades now. But my favorite week to bet is that conference championship week leading up to Selection Sunday. I do think the NCAA tournament is the greatest betting spectacle that we have in America from a one singular event type of perspective, but I love conference championship week and the heat of the moment getting up to those automatic bids. You don't want the upsets there. You want the upsets in the NCAA tournament, perhaps, but you don't want them in conference championship week. You want these conferences to send their best to the NCAA tournament so we can have that madness that first weekend.
Oh, you do, but you still get those teams that are just like, wow, how did this happen? And the kids are so excited because nobody expected them to do it. And that's what I love to see. And we're going to see some of that this year. But yes, I do want to see somebody contend in there. And I got one in my mind because I have a question to ask you about that. But before we get into that, Josh, what do you look for late February, this time of year, to try to find value on the board?
Well, we have a unique situation now where some of these teams are frankly going to stop caring. Recent changes to many of the smaller conference tournaments and the larger ones for that matter have led these conferences to truncate the conference tournament. So every team is not going to make it. You've seen that in the MAC. There's been other leagues. The American has truncated their conference tournament. So teams are being eliminated now with games left on the regular season schedule. It used to be where a team wouldn't be eliminated until they lost their last game in the early rounds of their conference tournaments. But now, with teams just being eliminated from playoff contention with games remaining in the schedule, I think that's something to keep in mind because apathy is going to set in. Coaching staff might be looking forward to next year and playing some younger guys. And with that said, there's a lot of these races that are neck and neck, and teams are vying for conference seeding positioning. So the teams at the top are really going to continue caring. The other thing I would look at is a lot of these teams are banged up. Everybody's dealing with injuries in some capacity. And when you have rest advantages, they really start to matter here. And so if you have a team that plays Saturday, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, that's tough compared to a team that's maybe been off since Monday. And you can find those situational spots where you have a team that has significant rest advantages.
Without a doubt, there is a big rest factor, especially when you go through a gauntlet this time of year, which there's a couple teams that we might even talk about that did that coming up this weekend. Yeah, 100%, man. And there's some teams already eliminated from their conference tournaments in the Metro Atlantic Conference. There's a few coming up this weekend that are already eliminated. And, you got to be very careful to bet on them because these kids might quit until senior night, and that doesn't even mean they're going to show up on senior night too. It's just, it's not like anybody quits in the beginning of a game, but in the third quarter, second half, beginning of the second half, I should say, if you're kind of down by 15, 12, They mail it in more often than not, and you're going to see some of those teams. And that's why laying big favorites, actually, believe it or not, late February has been a profitable angle, Josh.
Yeah, I can totally understand why too. The teams at the top of the race, even if you're not in first place in your conference, if you're in second, third, or fourth place, but you're jockeying for a kind of a power position come conference tournament time, you really want to put the kibosh on any shenanigans with a lesser foe late in the season. And so I can totally understand why some of those teams at the top of their leagues definitely take care of business against teams that are out of the conference race, if not mathematically eliminated at this point. So it's an angle I definitely look to attack this time of year.
All right. Well, let's get into our next question. Remember those angles, guys. This is important stuff when it comes to being profitable. Injuries. You brought up injuries. I want to ask you how you deal with injuries in this situation, and nothing more worse than what we saw this week for JT Toppin. I had a little money on him to win the Player of the Year, and not going to happen now. I thought he was going to catch Boozer because they beat Boozer, and he beat Arizona, and the away game, or away from home, both of them. And that was just a really sad thing to see because I'm such a big fan of JT Toppins and Texas Tech. But how do you deal with this injury now? Like, how would you approach betting or fading Texas Tech?
Well, Texas Tech was a team that I had a future on to win the national title. I did cash out and take a small loss, but it's just one of those situations where injuries at large are affecting the majority of the 365 teams. But this specific injury is so critical. Toppin was such a force on the offensive end. He was a huge part of the engine that drives success on that end of the floor. Their offense was very good. It's just devastating, in my opinion, because when you look at Texas Tech and Grant McCaslin in a microcosm, their defense was such a catalyst at Texas Tech and North Texas for McCaslin before that. And their defense this year is just a B minus type of rendition of a patented Texas Tech defense. And Toppin was such a critical part of that on that end of the floor. And so now the defensive tenacity and the effectiveness of the Texas Tech defense gets mitigated by a certain percentage because of his absence. And you're not going to have him on the offensive end. So I thought Texas Tech was a team that had started to put the formula together to make a very serious run in the NCAA tournament. Now I'm not sure they see the second weekend. It is, with this particular player and this composite makeup of this team, it is hugely critical for him, and he's not going to be there. It's such a shame to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people are quick to fade teams that the very next game after a massive injury, and that is the wrong thing to do. And I'll tell you why. It's a psychological thing. These kids are going to rally and play out of their minds the very next game, and that's just how that happens. So they're going to be playing at home against Kansas State, and there's going to be a line adjustment probably for the injury. But you think that these kids, they're going to quit because Toppin's not in, or they're just not going to be as good. No, they might even look like a freaking superstar the next game, and it's going to smack you in the face and be like, why the heck would I fade him? And then the next game, you try to make up to your mistake, and then you bet on this team, and they absolutely freaking crumble. The next game is the actual bet on spot for a lot of these injuries, and it's not that much different than a coach being fired. A coach being fired, the players don't want to make it look like it was them. We were on Kansas State the other night because of that. Josh, that's a big angle I look at. Do not fade them immediately just to fade them.
Yeah, and you know what? Looking at what is remaining for Texas Tech the rest of the way, they do have a couple of softer landing spots, and so I could see them. I don't know what the game's going to be lined at on Saturday. I would imagine it's 18.5 or so. I'm not running to the window to try to lay that with Texas Tech. I would imagine they win that game at home and possibly the next one against Cincinnati. But if you look at how they conclude their season with Iowa State, TCU, and BYU, my goodness, that could be some big trouble for Texas Tech after that initial boost of rallying the troops and playing out of their minds the couple games after the injury.
Yeah, Ken Palm shows 17, so maybe it's less than that. If it's not, then the books are on to what I just explained, that the player being injured is not going to be, the market's going to actually like that spot. But, be careful with it. I think, later this, just like we talked about TCU, playing some of those better teams, Iowa State, that's the time you're really going to want to fade Texas Tech. let's talk under the radar. Josh, you love college basketball. You love the small teams just as much as you love the big teams. And that's what we love about you. You're not biased. You watch everything. Give me an under the radar team that could mess up somebody, that can just shock them, that coming into the NCAA tournament. Of course, they got to win their conference tournament. So, yeah, I guess you got to assume that. Or you can give me a Power 5 school that is kind of bubbly.
Well, I mean, the first thing is there's a team I want to buy low on right now, and that's Northern Iowa. This team is really good, and they hadn't played really that well all season up until the point where they got Tristan Smith back from injury. He's been such a bright spot for UNI since coming back, and the offense has scored 80 points for UNI in 4 straight games. This is a group I want to play on the rest of the way this season. They've got Southern Illinois coming up on Saturday. It's a big revenge spot for Northern Iowa, excuse me. And then they conclude their season with Illinois State and Drake. UNI is one of those teams that's battling in the Missouri Valley Conference for seeding positioning, and I really think that this group is about the only one in the bunch that can challenge Belmont in this conference. So UNI is a team that I think is still flying under the radar. They've won 5 out of their last 6. They're destroying the competition in their league. It's them, Belmont, and Illinois, Chicago that I think have a chance to win that conference. So buy low right now is on Northern Iowa.
Well, listen to that. I believe they're one of the best unders teams, if I remember. I look at trends a lot. I think that they're pretty good to the under too. I'm staying in the Missouri Valley. My under the radar team that could mess somebody up in this tournament's Belmont. They toyed with Murray State, and I was on the over that game, and I was like mad at Belmont. I thought they're going to lose outright. They're down 17 points or something in the first half, and they just made Murray State look like fools in the second half. They are unstoppable. I mean, it's not like super under the radar. It's kind of like one of those McNeese States of last year because they're ranked like in the 60s in the efficiency sites, Josh, but they're not getting talked about as much like McNeese. And maybe come March Madness, my little trendy team will be a little too trendy, right? Maybe people are going to jump all over Belmont for their 5-12 upset or whatever it is, 13-4, one of those situations. But I think Belmont is a very dangerous offense. And as long as they're hot, they could shock a lot of middle of the road to good Power 4 teams.
Well, truer words have never been spoken. And you look at the offense they run, Casey Alexander, he brought that similar style over from Lipscomb, and Lipscomb was dangerous under his watch. And Belmont just hits the 3 ball so consistently well, and they've got all 5 guys that can shoot it from deep. It's an offense that's hard to prepare for, and when you get into the NCAA tournament setting and you haven't prepared for this type of offense and you're not really accustomed to seeing a team being able to put it on you from deep that regularly, it's just a tough out for Belmont. So I think they need a favorable draw. I think Belmont is a team that can get out athleted if they had to play a team like, let's say Vanderbilt or Arkansas or Kentucky, somebody like that. Could be a tough out. But I think in the right draw, Belmont's a team that could absolutely not only bust brackets, but see themselves into a situation where they're playing on the second weekend.
Oh, that would be great. And I mean, could we get so cute where it's an FAU type situation? 500-1 for Belmont to make the Final Four right now. And I'd rather see 1,000 or 10,000, 100,000-1, I should say. But I mean, that's 500-1. 1,000 wouldn't be great, but I'm gonna shop that around a little bit. Maybe I'll toy with it because you get them to the Sweet 16, you get them to the second weekend, you can easily start hedging that thing. 2 more games just to get to the Final Four. That would be a pretty nice. You could really have a good time hedging that thing. So I'm going to look at that just for a little bit. Sell high team. So I'll go with buy low on Belmont. I'm going to sell Iowa a little bit here. Iowa, their schedule non-conference was really easy, and they caught a lot of teams at some really fortunate times. They got to play a Nebraska team that was kind of crumbling a little bit, and this Nebraska team, I mean, they only scored 57 points against Nebraska. Nebraska just whipped Northwestern, but they got beat against Purdue. Nebraska's kind of looking a little rough right now, but Iowa's best win non-conference was Grand Canyon. And then if you want to count Xavier or Ole Miss, okay, but these are some really bad teams. They had like some of the easiest non-conference schedule in the power conferences. And then, you see them go to Maryland and get beat against a really bad Maryland team. They didn't really beat anybody except that recent win against Nebraska. They play slow, but their defense, their effective field goal on defense, only 154th in the nation. They play slow, but I think that their numbers are a little skewed by that. So I'm gonna sell Iowa.
Iowa's a unique case study because they have a very good system and they've got some guys that are just complete ballers. Bennett Sturts is a guy that I would want on my team, and I would want 5 duplicates of him if I was formulating a team. But Iowa can get bullied, and we saw it against Purdue twice. We saw it against Illinois. We saw it against Iowa State, where this team in the painted area can just at times get out-athleted by some of the other teams in their league. So I don't hate that position on them, and I think we'll see that down the stretch. It could happen against Wisconsin, but it could certainly happen against Michigan when they host the Wolverines on March 5th, where this team at times just appears to get bullied.
Agreed. Do you have a sell high team?
I do. It's a small college team again, but I want to go back to the MAC, and I'm talking the MAC, the Metro Atlantic, and I want to look at Marist. And I love Marist. I love the defense for John Dunn. I like what he's done with this team all the way back to his St. Peter's days. But Tarek Watson has been out of the fold for some time now, and Elijah Lewis going down with injury for Marist has been really bad for them. They have looked terrible on the offensive end without him. 60, 56, and 63 points scored against putrid defenses. Fairfield, Merrimack's defense is good, but then Sienna's defense. And you look at the Red Foxes, they're projected by Ken and by some of those other power rating sources to be favored the rest of the way. But Marist may not win a game the rest of the season. They're just missing too many of the heavy hitters on offense. The defense is still decent, but I'm not wanting to lay any points with this team whatsoever. And when you look at a team trying to win the Metro Atlantic Conference tournament, I just do not think Marist has the horses with the current injury situation. They're just missing too many guys right now. So they're projected 6-point favorites or so on the road against Manhattan tomorrow, and I do not want to lay any points with them. I think Manhattan can win that game outright, and I want to fade Marist the rest of the way.
I was looking at Niagara and Marist for tomorrow a little bit, to be honest with you. Or not Marist, I'm sorry, Marist's opponent because of those injuries. And they're 4.5-point favorites right now on the road, Marist. And this is a spot where Manhattan, I think, can pick it up here. And it's not like Manhattan hasn't beaten some good teams at home. They beat Quinnipiac at home, They beat Sacred Heart. It's not like they're a top team. They're not, but they're now kind of playing to the same level as Marist should be playing because of those injuries. So I'm with you on that one. And we'll be looking at some big Friday games too. See what we can fade. But let's talk a little bit about our 6-pack of games then. And I believe you picked one for Friday with a MAC, not Mac, but MAC situation with a team called Akron. And Akron, funny enough, does not have the best conference wins in the MAC because of good old Miami, Ohio. But from an efficiency side, Akron is the number 1 team in the MAC, and they play Ball State away. Should be laying some big points. What are your thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising to some, and Miami of Ohio has become a household name. Everybody knows about the undefeated status and the win streak, but the Zips are the best team in this conference. They're power rated by most to be the strongest team in this league, and the defense has been really the biggest surprise for John Gross and this Akron squad. They are first in defensive efficiency, field goal percentage surrendered, and 2-point defense in this league. And they're squaring off against a Ball State team that is just really, really bad on the offensive end. I look at the first meeting, Ball State was down at one point in the second half, 74-52. They made a little bit of a run late to make the final score a little bit closer than the game actually was, but I'm not sure we see it play out this way this time around. Ball State's coming off a loss against Ohio U, where they scored just 15 points in the first half and shot just 5 out of 18 from deep. The physicality brought by Akron, Mahaffey, and Amani Lyles down low are going to just be absolutely too much for Akron against Ball State. And the other thing about Ball State, they have the worst three-point defense in the MAC. Akron made 12 out of 28 from deep against Western Michigan earlier this week, and they also collected 13 offensive rebounds. This is such a huge mismatch. Akron is going to be able to have second chance opportunities procured. They're going to rebound misses. They're going to get to the foul line. And frankly, I just don't think Ball State is going to be able to keep up. You look at a team that is 13th out of 13 in the MAC in 2-point shooting. They don't shoot a ton of threes, but they're bad when they do have to shoot them. And there's really not a lot to draw from. I think Ziegler is a decent player for them, and Davion Hill has come back, missed a couple games. He could be okay for Ball State. But Akron, I have this power rated at 22, and currently they're laying 14.5. I have no issue with the road chalk here. I'm laying the number with the Zips. They should win this game by 20 points.
All right. Yeah. And what's funny is that Akron is not going to have any sort of home field numbers or advantage here. I'm sorry. I mean, Ball State's not. There's nobody's going to this game. There might be more Akron fans actually in this situation here. So I'm with you, man. I'm gonna write that down. I think I'm gonna lay some big road chalk for Akron. Akron, they're trying to make like a case for themselves to be an at-large, and there's really not a lot they can stand on with 5 losses here. But, I know they want to get a top seed in the tournament here. And Miami, Ohio is the true opponent for them. And the best scenario for the MAC is them winning the tournament and Miami, Ohio going undefeated and losing to them in the championship game. Guess what? The MAC gets 2 teams in the NCAA tournament that way. So I think that's very possible.
Well, truer words have never been spoken there as well. And I look at the MAC, and I've been talking about this all season. That's a very real possibility. Akron lost by just a couple of points on the road against Miami of Ohio. It was a coin flip game, back and forth. Could have won it. They didn't, but they could have. Had a close loss against Yale. They played Purdue competitively for 28 minutes. After the under 12, it was kind of Purdue started to separate. But Akron went in there and played pretty well against Purdue. And I really think we have a legitimate chance for the MAC to become a 2-bid league this season. Miami of Ohio is going to be favored the rest of the way and should conclude the regular season undefeated. But when it comes down to it, as long as we don't have chaos, and the MAC is generally not a league where we see a ton of chaos in the conference tournament, it should be Miami of Ohio against Akron in the MAC final. And if Akron wins that game, the MAC is absolutely a 2-bid league.
All right, that'd be great. And that'd be great for the MAC. And, I would rather see both these teams in than a team like Missouri. Yeah,
I mean, we don't need another 18-13 West Virginia team or Virginia Tech or some of those teams that are just like on the cusp. We've seen it; they've had their chances. Let's not do that.
Let's go. Well, I'm not going to go to the big game just yet. I'll just go to North Carolina, Syracuse. I'm probably projecting a pick here. Syracuse is at home. The total is about 150. And you say, yeah, why is this a pick? North Carolina is favored by 3 to 5 points. And all that. Well, clearly, if you're not following college basketball, Henry Visar has been on the shelf for North Carolina, and their top player, Caleb Wilson, he's done. He's not playing until at least March Madness, some form of March Madness, whether it's the conference tournament or it's whether the NCAA tournament. But 7-foot center Henry Visar is he's a big part of that game. And I was all over NC State last game, and I'm not going to stop just here. If you look at UNC when they did get that big injury to Caleb Wilson, they had their bump and they won their game. UNC was able to dominate Pittsburgh at home, and then after that happened, they lose to NC State and lose bad. But this is the point where I'm fading this coach, Hubie Davis. I don't think Hubert Davis is a good coach. I think he's a man that's been blessed with some of the best talent that college basketball can bring a team, yet he's underachieved his whole career for the most part, and he only gets as far as his talent does. North Carolina is a very bad free throw shooting team, ranking 290th in free throws. So if this game's kind of tight, you really cannot rely on that. The only thing they do is really play some defense here, but without Caleb Wilson and Visar, Visar is going to be questionable. I don't know what's going to happen with him, so the line's probably going to be teetering a little bit. It's not going good enough. Syracuse, on the other hand, they're still fighting here. They know that they, as long as they get into the tournament and do a good job, I'm talking the ACC tournament, they have a shot to get to the NCAA tournament. Here's the big thing. They have some quadrant one wins because North Carolina would still be considered a quadrant one win for now. And they have Louisville as well. You get those 2 wins and you compile that with your SMU and Tennessee win. They're going to have an argument to be one of those ugly teams that we hate to see in the NCAA tournament. So this is just a massive spot for Q's. And I'm going to pick Q's to win this game. North Carolina, I think they're just poorly coached. And by the way, their home road splits on Haslametrics, how many teams are there? 365? That's where they rank. 365th in home road splits. I'm taking Q's.
Well, it's not a bad approach, and I don't love Syracuse overall, but I do like them in this situation. And you know what? The Qs have proven that they are dangerous. They took Houston to the wire. They defeated Tennessee. They've got some good wins on the slate. And while I don't think that Qs has done enough just yet to become an NCAA tournament team, if they win out and they win 2 games in the ACC tournament, and you are 10-8 in league play and with 21 wins, 22 wins, if depending on how far they may advance. I mean, that's the quintessential NCAA tournament bubble team, and that's a first 4 team in Dayton. And so they have a chance to salvage their season on the brink, and going up against UNC with Caleb Wilson out of the fold. And if Henry Visar is out, that is just atrocious because the Qs will be able to collect offensive rebounds. They'll be able to matriculate second chance opportunities, and they'll win the war on the glass on the other end. It could just be one of those situations where every time you look at the TV, Syracuse has the ball and you don't understand why until you realize the personnel that's actually out there. So this is probably the spot where you want to back the Qs.
100%. And what's funny about Qs is that they're that weird team, like during the Boeheim years, people like, why you put Q's in? All of a sudden they make a run as an 11 seed in the Final Four. So that's just kind of like been their mantra. Just get in the tournament. And then all of a sudden they do some destructive stuff. I don't think they have the gut horses to this year or the talent that they used to get, to be honest, but it's just a point I wanted to make. Let's go to one of your games then that you want to talk about for Saturday in Oregon State, Pepperdine. And I don't know where you project this total, but I assume that it's going to be somewhat high. I can pull up what Ken Palm does, but why don't you give us your handicap on this one?
Well, Ken is adjusting as we speak here, and his total has crept up a tad here from what it was 4 hours ago and 14 hours ago. But if you look at Oregon State and Pepperdine, the over-under is projected about 143, 144. I like that, and I like Oregon State's team total to surpass 75.5. We've got the last Saturday home game for the Beavs, who have been much more aggressive in the painted area in recent games. They should shred Pepperdine in the paint and get to the foul line a ton here. But really, this is about the Pepperdine Waves. And if you go back and just look at about the last 6 or 7 games, Pepperdine has completely quit playing defense. Ed Schilling has scrapped the slow pace, methodical defensive style that Pepperdine played for much of the non-conference and the first half of league play. I mean, my goodness, they played a game against St. Mary's that had 61 total possessions, and now their possessions are in the 80s or high 70s. It's just a team that has stopped trying to do their defensive scheme as the season is lost for Pepperdine once again. They're not accumulating the wins. And they've surrendered 80 points or more in 8 games in a row. They did it again yesterday against Portland. They actually won the game 95-87, and they've actually won the last 2 playing this style. So we're going to see this sort of change in script. Ken has this game going 66 possessions, but I would bet my life it's 76 or higher possessions just because of the way that Pepperdine is playing. So we get a couple of teams that want to go up and down. You talk about points in the paint. Oregon State, they're getting so many more paint touches for guys like Isaiah Sy and Johan Munch and Yak Yak, and those guys are going to just They're going to have open looks at the rim all night. So could have 50 or 60 points in the paint here. Oregon State's team total is projected 75.5. I want to go over, and I want to go full game over. Let's call it 144 at current.
All right, over 144. You know, the thing about Oregon State is even though their pace only ranks 316th, they get to the free throw line a lot. They rank 21st in free throw attempts, which means they're getting fouls, and they're fouling a decent amount too, ranking 214th in opponent free throw attempts per field goals attempted. So that's something I always look at too when I'm looking at totals, is that's got to line up as well. And this lines up actually pretty well with your handicap right now. But both these defenses aren't great. Yeah, like you said, I think you could have mentioned earlier, this is something you look for too. Teams that just change their pace because they're kind of out of it and want to just experiment with something else. How do you get to like 180 points the last two games? 180. That is pretty amazing. Even the St. Mary's game went to 148, So, and St. Mary's in general is a slow paced team that we know. So that's a good handicap right there. And I'll write that down for this over here coming up for Saturday. I'm going to have to go to the Big Daddy. I mean, this is going to be a game that you must watch because it's great basketball. There's the thing that I love basketball, and I do watch the small games when I can. I have 2 or 3 TVs that going at once during the week, and sometimes more on the weekends. But this is a skilled game because Michigan's playing Duke, and there's just a lot of NBA talent on both of these teams. And you're just going to see a lot of crisp, efficient play, not even just on offense, but, just watch how they get off the ball screens on defense, right? It's just going to be such a fun game to watch. I'm super excited for this game. Right now, Duke is, I think I'll call it 2 right now. I think it's going to go back to 1.5. I'm going to wait on this a little bit. And the total's already at 148.5. People got, some of these books have had this game out for weeks, to be honest with you. They know what's going on. They stuck this game out there and the odds for this for a long time now. That you still haven't even seen 96, 97% of the bets yet on this game. There's going to be way more coming in. I think it's going to adjust pretty quick, but this is going to be played on a neutral court in Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. The rule of thumb for neutral courts, big games is usually the under. I'm not so sure about that. What's funny, both teams are number 1 and number 2 in defensive efficiency. So it's like, who's going to stick out a little bit more, right? But Michigan, the speed that they play at and how efficient they are in offense, we got the 4th offense versus the 7th offense. But here's another thing with these teams, Josh. They blow out so many teams that the last 5 minutes of the games are not really being accounted for. They're not. They're better than even the numbers show in most cases, especially Michigan. Because Michigan, when they played on their neutral courts earlier in the season, they blew everybody out. The only time they really had that hiccup was against Wisconsin, my Badgers, and I'm happy as hell about it. But it was just the only way you're going to beat this team is being unconsciously shooting threes, like
which they did.
Exactly, because Wisconsin's got great guard play, and Wisconsin's guard play is what happens, and that's what you look for in the tournament, and that's a whole nother discussion that we can absolutely have. But Michigan's front court is an absolute beast over there. Morez Johnson's an absolute beast. How about Mara, 7'3", and the way this guy moves? They're just unstoppable down low. I can't say enough for how good this Michigan team is, but I really think the numbers are not quite showing it enough. And here's the thing with Duke. They have had, since the non-con, they played Florida. And Florida was not Florida back on December 2nd. Florida was trash back on December 7th. They finally figured it out. They played Kansas, who Kansas didn't have the greatest start either. But this ACC is bad this year. And I just think that Duke's defense is a little bit too highly ranked based upon the bad ACC that they've been playing in. When they played Louisville wasn't healthy, right? I think that my number for a total in this game is 151.5. So but here's the thing. I think this total is going to shoot up. It's at 148.5. I'm taking the over right now I will plan on taking the under later. I'm just going to go for a flat out middle in this if it gets to 152.5 or more, which is very, very possible here. But at the same time, I'm not going to feel super great about the under because I just think that these teams, this is the game that could just be lights out NBA-esque. And my buyback might even be for half. But I also think Michigan's 4 points better than this team. I'm not betting it now. I'm waiting a little bit. I want a 1.5 or a pick 'em. Michigan just has performed much better on the neutral courts against some of the best teams out there. Straight to schedule, both these teams great. Michigan's 7th in the nation. Duke's 16th in the nation strength of schedule. I'm so excited, but I see I see more for Michigan on this end, and I'm going to lay it with Michigan when I get the chance, Josh.
Yeah, I don't hate that look at all, given the prowess of what we saw when they were playing in a neutral court environment and just destroying teams in the neutral setting. Generally, in these situations, when you have a game played this late in the season on a neutral court in a setting where these teams are unfamiliar, I would generally lean first half under, and I would just assume that it takes a little time for the line of sight to line up. And, the fact of the matter is we have two defenses that are just absolutely exquisite. They are first and second in the nation in defensive efficiency. Both these defenses can just contest everything. And there's a chance, and it might happen in the middle 8 minutes of the first half, or it might happen the last 5 minutes of the second half, where these teams are going to lock in defensively, and neither one's going to be able to buy a bucket. So when are we going to get that sort of defensive slog slow down, and then which team can ultimately rise above it and get baskets, hit the big three, get to the foul line for a 1-and-1 critically late? I think that's going to be it's a razor thin difference in these games between these two powerhouse teams. But Michigan they had played with their food a bit at times. We saw them down 15 against Northwestern. They struggled for a half with Ohio State. They played a little bit poorly on the road against Michigan State. But you know what? These guys show up and they play up when the big teams come to town, or when they really have to have it against Indiana or against Purdue when Purdue came in there, or the list goes on, Nebraska, all these tough teams that they play, Gonzaga, they just show up and win these games. I think Michigan's a real dangerous team.
Very dangerous. And Michigan they've, even when they've played their C or D game, they still stretched it out against like Nebraska and some of those other teams that you just mentioned. So let's move on to the next game. And I believe you are up next, and we're looking at Maryland Eastern Shore against Coppin State, correct? And are we looking at a side or a total?
We're looking at the under, and I know this is grotesque, and I appreciate all the listeners hanging in there and kind of packing it in when we're talking about a game as disgusting as this one. But this money spends the same as any money on Duke and Michigan, and so I want to talk about it because I think we do have some.
Wait, you mean the 343rd team against the 364th team on Ken Palm is not going to be an exciting game?
Hey, if I can get a bet down on the game, it's going to be exciting because I'll be sweating the last 10 minutes just like any other game I watch this season. But yeah, what you have here is you have a projected total for Eastern Shore against Coppin State at 133.5. You have two offenses that rank 350th and 361st nationally in offensive efficiency, and Eastern Shore is bottom 5 nationally in tempo. Now, the first matchup saw Eastern Shore with a 70-67 win in a game that had two awful foul shooting teams in Eastern Shore and Coppin State combined to make 38 out of 40 from the line. And it was a second half that saw 47 points in the final 10 minutes. First of all, this meeting is not going to play out that way. Second of all, the first matchup trended under, and it became a foul fest at the end where, again, both these teams are very poor foul shooting teams outside the top 240, each of them, and they combined to make 38 out of 40. Well, since that time, neither one of these teams has shot anywhere close to that number from the line. But beyond the foul shooting, Coppin State has completely changed how their team is playing the last 4 games. The Eagles had gone up tempo. They were playing a little bit of pace and space, But if you look at head coach Larry Stewart, he's completely reverted to a slower grind pace with a significant defensive focus for Coppin State. Here's what the results have been, Kiev: 65-47 against Delaware State, 58-56 against North Carolina Central, and 59-57 against South Carolina State, 3 games that never even approached the posted total at close. Maryland Eastern Shore wants this game in the low 60s, and I really think that's what we get here. At 133.5 or so, we're absolutely going under. I really think it's the first team to 65 wins this game.
This MEAC conference is the worst that I've ever seen in my entire life.
Horrific. It's horrific basketball.
I mean, the top team in Howard ranks 303rd. Listen to the rankings here. Half the conference is 355th or worse. You have 303.
It is so bad.
316, 336, 355, 350, 361, and 365. Delaware State is only the worst team behind Eastern Shore, right? This is so bad. I mean, so only Josh could find such a good play in such a bad conference. And I love this play because you look at the trend line on them. You are absolutely right. Coppin is playing a hell of a lot slower here. And then Eastern Shore is always playing slow at 360th. And I don't know how these two offense can even score past 55 points apiece. And what's funny is their defenses are not like terrible. They're not nearly as terrible as their offenses, right? Coppins is kind of up there, but that's only because I think they had just a little bit harder. But I love it. I wrote this down. I'll be with you on this one, so for sure.
Yeah, and when you look at the rankings on these teams, if you're looking at the national average, you're going to see a lot of red because you're comparing against 364 other teams. But you really do need to look at the conference rankings because that is reflecting competition kind of at the skill level of these teams. And Maryland Eastern Shore's defense should be able to put the kibosh on Coppin State. The way you beat Coppin State is forcing them into the half court. These guys on offense are just so stinking bad. They don't move without the basketball. There's really very little motion. They really don't run a flex offense out of the post. They don't procure a lot of paint touches. And so it's really 4 guys standing around just calling for the ball. And then you put a move on a guy, you back it out, you throw up a 3 late in the shot clock. Again, I get it. It's garbage basketball, but this should be a lot of missed shots and a lot of one and done possessions here. I think this is going to be a hard under.
And what I mentioned was the offensive ratings because Howard is actually the 220th team. But if you look at it, it's actually even worse if you look at both of these together because you literally have the worst teams in college basketball. I'm going to go to a Sunday game and talking a little bit about what I mentioned on the Badgers and Iowa. I am fading Iowa here. And I think the efficiency sites are a little bit wrong because of some of Wisconsin's inconsistency here. But this is a spot play for me. Wisconsin went to Ohio State fat and happy after a big Illinois and Michigan State win. They looked completely lethargic that game. They looked like they didn't want to be there. Ohio State looked like it was do or die. It looks like there was a gun to their head in that game. They were playing out of their minds. They got jumped. Wisconsin got jumped. Never really can get back in. It didn't even really look like they care back in. But Wisconsin does respect this Iowa rivalry. Wisconsin owns this rivalry, and Wisconsin's going to get it done. The thing I love about Wisconsin in this game, they can play teams from a fast-paced perspective. They can play teams and win on a slow-paced perspective. You saw what they did against Illinois. You saw what Wisconsin did against Michigan. You saw what they did against a crawling, slow Michigan State team earlier as well. When Wisconsin is on, this team is dangerous, and they can really beat anybody, and they've already proved it. This Iowa team was a sell high to me for a lot of reasons. I think the reason that they beat Nebraska was the rebounding, and that was such a slog, ugly 109 total points game. That was more on just Nebraska being bad, in my opinion. Iowa's defense, 32nd in efficiency on Ken Pom on paper, but man, like I mentioned, ranking in the 150s and opponent effective field goal, 154th, that is something wrong. Wisconsin, 72nd on effective field goal percentage on offense. They're going to score points against Iowa at home. The Badgers are on the bounce. The most glaring thing is a tougher schedule, though. Wisconsin played a lot harder of a schedule than Iowa, and I don't think that's factored in enough here. What's funny is you look at the line. They have it close to pick 'em in some of these books. I hope it is pick 'em. I'm thinking I'm going to have to lay up to 2. I wrote 1.5 here. I think you might have to get this one the opener because I think other people are sniffing this out as well. They're going to be on Wisconsin in this game. Wisconsin at Camp Randall is a very, very good home court advantage. And just like Wisconsin can play at any pace, Iowa is not a good catch-up team. Once they're down, they're out. Lay the points with Wisconsin.
Love it.
All right. We got some agreement here from the Duck. And Wisconsin here. I got something a little sweeter for a little beer bet banger when we get to that. But hey, it's time to go a little hodgepodge, dude. Hodgepodge. And you know what we didn't talk about was Friday's game with Indiana. And Indiana is actually going to be a pretty big dog at Purdue. And is it big enough? This Indiana team kind of caught some heat for a while. I think it's because they talked to the football coach over there, Cincinnati, and I think they kind of woke up in a little bit. They beat Purdue. They go to UCLA and beat them. Then they lose to USC, but then they beat Wisconsin. You know, Indiana, that was kind of a fraudulent win, if you remember. And then they beat Oregon. Then they get smoked against Illinois. I don't know how long that can last where they get a big pep talk from the football coach, which actually happened, by the way. That actually did happen. But
it happened with last time Purdue went there.
It sure did. And now Purdue is looking at this game and they're wanting a little revenge against Indiana. I think, I mean, it's 10.5. I could see this getting down to 9.5, and I could possibly be a buyer here. Did you look at this game?
I mean, not extensively, but I would think this is just such a spot for Purdue. I mean, they were a bit humbled against Michigan earlier this week, and they did have that 3-game losing streak, concluding with a loss at Indiana. And it was after Indiana won the football championship and had their team celebration that night. So a little bit more of a spirited effort there from the Hoosiers there. But I mean, this is a spot for Purdue. A team that I thought after the 3-game losing streak would rebound nicely. We saw them destroy Nebraska for the first 38 minutes and then really let the Huskers back in. It had to survive overtime. Good, strong road win against Iowa. I was surprised at how they got bullied against Michigan, but I really think that this is a spot where Purdue shows up. They're such an efficient offensive team. I really think that a guy like Kaufman-Wren could score a ton of points here. I mean, he could easily have 20 points and 10 rebounds in this basketball game. So they really need it. Purdue really needs a big win here. Rivalry aside, they need to get off the schneid here and wash that Michigan stink off of them. I think this is the spot they do it.
All right. Well, let's see if they can get a big win from Matt Painter. You know, why is Arizona a 5-point dog right now at Houston? And the line's out for this in some books. I mean, I haven't seen Arizona as a 5-point dog since maybe against UConn in the beginning of the season, or Florida, you know, but Arizona beat some serious teams. Florida, UConn, Bama, Auburn. You know, I mean, they're a pretty dang good team. Then they went through an easy kind of Big 12, and it was easy. Don't get me wrong. They got like teams like Cincinnati, West Virginia, UCF. The BYU one, BYU kind of came back on them, and BYU did cover against them. But why is this line 5? Is it because Houston's got that much of a home court advantage, or is it because Cole Pete is out? You know, I don't know why it's 5. I mean, this line kind of stinks a little bit, doesn't it?
I mean, it's hard to lay that. I like playing Houston in a pick'em role, and I like playing them against inferior competition when they can just completely swarm them. But Arizona, this is going to be such a trench battle in the post, and it's going to be one of those situations. We know with Arizona, they shoot fewer threes than anybody in the country. They're 362nd in 3-point attempts, and they're going to get the ball in the paint. Houston's defense is very, very tough at allowing that, and they contest and they block or alter shots a ton. But Houston has had foul problems in the past, and they have sent their opponent to the line. And I just worry about if we get a heavy whistle in the situation, we get a couple guys for Houston that might get into foul trouble. If Senek gets into foul trouble or Joseph Tugler, could just be a problem for Houston. Houston is a team that I want to bet in the futures market. I think they have the blueprint that can make a serious deep run in the NCAA tournament. They're experienced with that. Kingston Flemings is incredible, but I'm not laying 5.5 here. There's just absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I have a little bit of a free pass for Arizona. They had a really tough loss against Kansas at Fog Allen on Big Monday a couple of weeks back. And anybody who watches that game, you can sit and say, I don't necessarily know if that game was truly officiated, honestly. It was not a situation where Arizona was getting any of the calls, and same activity the other way, and they were whistled for fouls. So it was just so disappointing to see that. Texas Tech, hey, you know what? They were up 5 late. They were down 5 late. They forced overtime. It was a coin flip game. Texas Tech's a really good team at that point with a healthy JT Toppin. You know, it's the way it goes. I think Arizona, and I said this about a month ago, I thought Arizona was one of those teams that really needed to face some adversity. You need to find out a little bit about your guys. What sort of intestinal fortitude do I have? What are my guys in the front court going to do when we're down by 8 and we're drawing dead and we don't want to call a timeout to regroup? I think Arizona needed to go through some of that. You could see the Wildcats go on a bit of a tear here to close the regular season and then into the Big 12 conference tournament. So at 5.5, I'm probably taking the Wildcats here.
I'm taking the Wildcats. 5.5. That's ridiculous. This line's stupid. You know, their best win is BYU. You know, Arizona. I mean, it's not like Houston had a lot of swings at it, but they lost against Iowa State. They had a shot there. And maybe it's because they're on the bounce because they're coming off that big loss. But their best win was Texas Tech, maybe. Or no, they lost to Texas Tech. They lost. Yeah, it's like, what's your best win? BYU, number 22? I guess when they beat Texas Tech and Texas Tech's 18, but Texas Tech's a very, very inconsistent team too. Maybe Arkansas on a neutral court. You saw what Arkansas did against Alabama. This is just too many points. We'll make that an official play too.
Yeah, and don't make a mistake about it. You know, I think when you look at Houston's wins against Auburn was good. Even Syracuse in the neutral environment was very good. Texas Tech way back on January 6th. These are two really, really good basketball teams. I just don't see a lot of separation here. You can't give 2 possessions on the road against arguably a top 3 team in the country in Arizona. I want to take the dog here.
Oven Fresh One wants to know if you you got your hedge that Virginia future you had in the championship game.
No, this is college football, and I appreciate the question. I'm glad Oven Fresh is staying up late with us. I had a Virginia 200-1 future to win the ACC. I was very public about the fact that I did not hedge that game. I almost attended that game in Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't end up doing it, but the Wahoos got so close. They were a team of destiny. It was written on the walls all year for Virginia, and they just couldn't close the deal.
I know. I remember that game. I'm like, seriously, you're gonna Duke go, and that just caused a firestorm with the got Miami.
It single-handedly got Miami in.
It got Miami in, which should have happened. Now that we look back, so I mean, that was pretty cool. You know, I mean,
well, you know, it's so funny that college football debate ended up being about Miami and Notre Dame. It really should have been about Alabama and Notre Dame.
Here's a game: BYU home dogs plus 3.5. Against Iowa State. I would not touch Iowa State with a 10-foot pole after they just beat Kansas and Houston at home. They lost to TCU before. This is a total, even without Saunders, I mean, I can see DeMonsta just having a monster game too. I feel like BYU is a team that can kind of keep up with Iowa State. I love Iowa State, don't get me wrong, but this is just such a bad spot for them. And say what you want about BYU, they did go on a really bad streak, losing to like Oklahoma State, and but the other losses, Arizona, Kansas, and Houston, all forgivable losses. And I don't know, man. This is that just seems like a spot where it's so dangerous for Iowa State, man. I would look at the dog there.
Well, I tend to agree. And I look at Iowa State's last game that was played on Monday at home against Houston. They trailed 63-53, and Houston couldn't get the job done. I was on Houston plus 2.5 and couldn't even get that one home as they couldn't collect a defensive rebound late and end up losing by 3. But Iowa State's been a little bit of a different operation offensively on the road. You look at their previous road game against TCU, 62-55, they lost. They lost against Cincinnati. They lost in Fog Allen. They didn't play exceptional basketball in a couple of their other road games this year. And BYU, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with them. They've got 7 losses here, 6 of them recent, against a really, really brutal schedule. They've battled some injury. I don't necessarily want to bet this game traditional. I think it's a great live betting game because I think both these teams are capable of making a 12-2 run. And so you might have a team down 8 early and you can play them as a dog. And then that same team may be up 8 points later on and you can get the other way and you can kind of live trade it that way and possibly win both. But I think DeBance's points total over is a good play here. I think when you look at Iowa State, a little bit more finesse. I think DeBance will get to the line. I think he'll be able to create a little bit in the paint. And I would look at maybe a point total over for him.
Yeah, definitely. If you can find a nice prop on that, look at a point total for that man who's going to be running the show now, kind of by himself. I think they have good coaching over there at BYU. I like Kevin Young, I thought he's done a pretty good job since he, had to take over a couple years back when what's his face left for Kentucky. Pope. Yeah, Mark Pope. Sorry, I had a brain fart. What about Sunday? Any other games that stick out? I know I covered the Wisconsin game a bit. It's funny. UConn. What the hell? How they lose? They're going to play Nova on Saturday. Actually, sorry, I did want to bring that game up. Forgot about that one. I think UConn against Nova looks dangerous too. UConn has been weird this year, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, do we think that UConn is elite? Do we think that they are worthy of where they're currently being slated by most bracketologists? Or is it just a lesser rendition of what we've seen from Hurley? And, he's there, so they must be good. And it's just kind of one of those things where I don't know. I don't know if I'm really all in yet on University of Connecticut.
All right. I'm not either. I like Hurley, but he's almost got, ever since he got that Lakers offer and turned it down, it's just been very weird over there.
Yeah, a little bit weird.
Ohio State versus Michigan State's another big game in the Big Ten on Sunday. I love Sunday Big Ten games. They do a pretty good job with that. Michigan State's gonna be laying about 8.5, probably too much for me. I would look at the under in this situation. I know Ohio State got really hot against Wisconsin, but I don't think that's going to happen in Michigan State. I think Michigan State's going to want to control this ball. Funny thing about Michigan State is that they play extremely good defense and they can just completely get cold on offense, even at home. Sometimes that happens. Ohio State, believe it or not, they're pretty efficient on offense, but they don't play a fast pace either. And you're looking at a total of about 145 points. I'll look at the under.
I would lean that way too, I think. Yeah, given what you said there, I'd probably lean under in that one.
Yeah, a letdown spot too after the big Wisconsin blowout here. So yeah, Michigan State here. Nice game against UCLA. UCLA, they got off the schneid too because they needed to do that. I'm gonna look at the under in this game. All right, beer bet bangers, my man. Any plus money long shots for whenever? It could be this sport, could be any sport. I got one for you if you don't have one.
I do have one. Yeah. I mean, are we sure Virginia should be 80-1? I mean, I look at the Wahoos. They are 23-3 this season with a 5-point loss against a UNC group that was loaded at the time, and a 3 overtime loss against Virginia Tech early in league play. But the Cavaliers defeated Texas handily, really good wins over Louisville, SMU, NC State, Ohio State.
And I really like the defense that has kind of been a holdover, just a rock solid defensive team. They're first in the ACC in effective field goal percentage, 2-point defense, 3-point defense, blocked and altered shots. Just a real buttoned up team that can absolutely get to the second weekend and beyond. I think when you look at a team like Virginia, they're currently pegged as a 5, but I think they can play their way onto the 4 line. And then you look at a team winning 2 games and getting to the Sweet 16. If they were to pull an upset beyond that and you have an 80-1 and they're in the Elite 8, you would have massive equity in that wager. And I just feel as though there's just so many guys for Virginia that can burn you. They can get you with DeRitter. Malik Thomas can handle the ball really well. Chance Mallory is an exquisite player on the offensive end. I mean, Sam Lewis, Johan Grunlaw. There's just so many guys for Virginia that can beat you. And they're really, really a buttoned up unit on the defensive end. So, I mean, 80-1, you think about them winning 2 games, possibly a third, and then you're really rolling with that wager. I would take a stab there with Virginia.
That's not bad. I mean, look at the record. It's almost perfect. They're running through the ACC, and it's so funny. We always hate it on a conference, and then all of a sudden they do great in the tournament. That could always happen as well. Virginia's got the pedigree to make some noise over here. So what plays well in the NCAA tournament? Guard play. Guard play does well in the NCAA tournament, and so I know I'm a homer. But I think Wisconsin at 27-1 to make the Final Four is not the worst bet in the world, man. 27-1, plus 2,700. You got Nick Boyd over there who has Final Four experience. He went there with FAU. He didn't have it quite so nice at San Diego State because these last 2 years. And sorry, Dutcher, San Diego State has not been good, and he kind of just was the only guy there. And then he gets out of there and he goes to Wisconsin to team up with Blackwell, who was last year the second best player on the Badgers. And now, it's these 2 guards. When guard play is great, you've seen it with Wisconsin go away from home and beat Michigan, away from home and beat Illinois. That really says something to me, that they can, get these big games done. How they beat Michigan State at home. Michigan State couldn't even crawl back in the game, even with the fouls going their way to try to make it closer. I think Wisconsin gets a decent draw, and maybe they stay away from an Arizona or a Michigan in their side of the bracket. Hopefully, this 27-1, I think, has a shot.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the draw, but I mean, certainly a team that has the pedigree, they have the capabilities with their offensive efficiency. They don't turn the ball over. They can procure trips to the foul line. They shoot the ball tremendously efficiently from 3-point range, and they shoot a lot of threes. And it's just a team in the NCAA tournament where you could look up at the under 15 and a team goes 3 for 3 from 3-point range, and bam, they already up 14 points on you. And it's like, this is going to be a really tricky out for an offense that you're not used to prepare for. If they get the right draw, I think this could certainly have some merit.
All right. Well, there we have it. Look for Wisconsin at 27-1. Where you also should look is Step on a Duck, my man Josh Nunn from the Action Network, who comes out with all kinds of great basketball, college football content. Josh, where could our listeners and viewers get your wonderful information?
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Kiev. For college hoops, it's exclusively Action Network. So I do 30-ish game previews per month over there. We have a midweek show on Wednesday afternoons with myself, Mike Calabrese, and Christian Ojakjian. We do a Friday and Saturday live shows that are live on YouTube. And you and I have spent some time together on Spaces with our friend Kyle Hunter, and we're always down to talk about college basketball breakdowns, talk high and low, national championship futures, everything else. And it won't be too long before we conclude this and quickly get to turn the page to spring football and the college leagues, my man. I know you're excited about college football. You and I live and breathe that, and it will not be long now.
And Josh will be on for some early podcasts, just like he was last year, sniffing out those teams like so what was it? So the Marshall under, there was a couple other ones with the in and Charlie Huff going over again, with his new team.
Mhm.
So that Southern Miss, that's who it was. It was sorry, I had the brain fart. See, when I switched to college basketball, it's like everything disappears, but then it all comes back when Josh comes on in April and in May. Josh, you're the best. Thank you so much for coming on, my man. Best of luck this weekend, and we'll be texting.
Sounds good, brother. Thanks for having me on. We'll see you at the window.